The city bus groaned as it pulled away from the curb, its tired engine echoing through the damp Chicago evening. Rain fell in thin, relentless lines, streaking the windows and blurring the neon signs outside into smeared bands of color. Inside, the air smelled of wet coats, old upholstery, and the faint metallic tang of exhaustion that came from people who had worked too long and spoken too little all day. Daniel Walker sat near the back, close to the exit doors. He chose that seat instinctively, the way some people always sat facing an entrance. His posture was relaxed but deliberate, shoulders slightly forward, boots planted firmly on the rubber floor. He wore a plain dark jacket, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low enough to shadow his eyes. To anyone glancing his way, he looked like just another quiet commuter trying to disappear into the crowd. At his feet sat a German shepherd. The dog was large, his coat a rich blend of black and tan, fur still slightly damp from the rain outside. He sat with perfect posture, back straight, head up, eyes calm but alert. His leash lay loose in Daniel's hand, not pulled tight, not slack enough to suggest carelessness, just right. The dog did not pant. He did not whine. He did not shift his weight as the bus lurched forward. He simply watched. A few passengers noticed the dog and looked away quickly, unsure if animals were allowed, unsure if they should complain. Others stared openly, some with admiration, others with irritation. A middle-aged woman clutched her purse closer as she passed them on the way to an empty seat. A teenage boy snapped a quick photo before his friend nudged him to stop. No one said anything. Daniel preferred it that way. Silence was easier. The bus rattled through traffic, stopping and starting, swallowing new passengers at each corner. At one stop near a liquor store, the doors hissed open and 3 young men climbed aboard together, bringing noise with them like a storm cloud. Their laughter cut through the dull murmur of the bus, loud and sharp. The smell of cheap alcohol followed them in, mixing unpleasantly with the stale air. They were in their early 20s, maybe younger. One wore a hoodie with the sleeves pushed up, showing off inked forearms. Another had a backward cap and a grin that never reached his eyes. The third was taller than the rest, broad-shouldered, moving with the loose confidence of someone used to taking up space. They scanned the bus, eyes flicking from seat to seat, judging, sizing up. When they spotted the German shepherd, their attention locked in immediately. "Well, damn," the tall one said, not bothering to lower his voice. "You see that?" The man with the cap snorted. "That thing's huge. Ain't that dangerous?" Their laughter rolled again, louder this time. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. Someone near the front muttered under their breath. The bus driver glanced in the mirror, jaw tightening, but said nothing. Experience had taught him when to intervene and when to wait. Daniel felt the change in the air instantly. His fingers moved once, slow and subtle, brushing the dog's collar. The German shepherd's ears twitched, barely noticeable. His eyes followed the men without turning his head. The thugs walked down the aisle, bumping shoulders, knocking knees, making no effort to apologize. When they reached Daniel's row, they stopped. The tall one dropped into the seat across from him, spreading his legs wide, elbows resting on his thighs. The other 2 remained standing, looming. "Hey," the tall one said, smirk curling his lips. "Dogs ain't allowed on buses, man." Daniel didn't respond. He kept his gaze lowered, hand resting calmly on the dog's head. The German shepherd didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't bare his teeth. He sat like a statue carved from muscle and discipline. "That thing bite?" the cap-wearing thug asked, snapping his fingers inches from the dog's face. A woman across the aisle sucked in a sharp breath. The dog's eyes flicked to the snapping fingers, pupils narrowing slightly. Daniel's grip tightened by a fraction. "Please don't," Daniel said quietly. His voice was low, even almost polite. The word please landed wrong. The men burst out laughing, louder than before. "You hear that?" the tall one said. "He said please." "What, you scared of us or something?" another sneered. Daniel finally lifted his eyes. They were steady, gray, and unreadable. No anger, no fear, just awareness. He didn't answer. Silence again. The bus continued forward, rain hammering harder against the windows now. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far away, rising and fading like a warning no one could quite place. Inside, tension coiled tighter with every second. The dog shifted his weight slightly, just enough for Daniel to feel it through the leash. Not a move toward aggression, just readiness. The tall thug leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "You know what happens to quiet guys like you," he said. "People think you weak." Daniel's jaw flexed once. His thumb rubbed a small scar near the dog's collar, an old habit grounding. A man 2 rows ahead stood up abruptly and moved toward the front, pretending to look for a seat that didn't exist. Others avoided eye contact, eyes glued to their phones or the rain-streaked windows. No one wanted to be part of this. The bus hit a pothole, jolting everyone. The lights flickered briefly, casting the interior into shadow before buzzing back to life. In that split second, the German shepherd's muscles tensed visibly, a coiled spring waiting for release. Daniel felt it. He whispered a single word, too soft for anyone else to hear. The dog stilled instantly. The tall thug laughed again, emboldened. "See, even your dog knows better." But as the bus rolled on through the darkened streets, something had already shifted. The quiet ride was no longer quiet. The storm had found its center, and none of the men standing there realized how close they were to crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. The laughter lingered longer than it should have, bouncing off the metal walls of the bus and settling into the ears of everyone trapped inside. It wasn't the sound of joy. It was the sound of dominance being tested, of people who fed on reactions and mistook silence for surrender. The tall thug leaned back in his seat, stretching his legs even wider until the toe of his sneaker nudged the German shepherd's paw. "Oops," he said, not moving it away. "My bad." Daniel looked down at the shoe, then at his dog. The German shepherd didn't pull back. He didn't bare his teeth. His breathing remained steady, measured. Only the faint tightening along his shoulders betrayed what lived beneath the calm. "Hey," the cap-wearing thug said, crouching slightly so his face was closer to the dog. "Bet this thing would freak out if I barked at it." "Don't," Daniel said again. Same quiet tone, same controlled volume. That restraint only encouraged them. "What you gonna do?" the third thug scoffed, arms crossed. "Call animal control." The tall one chuckled and pressed his shoe down harder, grinding it slightly. A low, barely audible growl vibrated from the German shepherd's chest, more felt than heard. A few passengers flinched. Someone near the front whispered, "Oh God." Daniel's hand closed around the leash, not tight enough to restrain, just enough to communicate. The growl stopped instantly. That caught the men's attention. "Yo," the tall thug said, eyebrows lifting. "You hear that? This dog trained or something." Daniel said nothing. The bus slowed at a red light. Outside, headlights washed across the windows, briefly illuminating faces tight with anxiety. The driver glanced up in the mirror again, fingers drumming on the steering wheel. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it. Too many times he'd seen situations like this explode the moment authority stepped in too early. The cap-wearing thug straightened and laughed. "Man, you gotta admit, it's kinda funny. Dude thinks he's special 'cause he got a big dog." "I think he's scared," the third thug said, pointing at Daniel. "Look at him, won't even look at us." Daniel was looking now. Not at their faces, but at their hands. At the way the tall one's fingers flexed. At the way the other kept brushing the pocket of his hoodie. At the way the third shifted his stance, angling his body like someone preparing to move fast. He'd seen this before, hundreds of times, different faces, same energy. The tall thug leaned forward suddenly, invading Daniel's space. "You deaf man, I'm talking to you." Daniel met his eyes fully for the first time. There was no glare, no threat, just calm, steady focus. "You should sit back," Daniel said, and leave us alone." The words were simple, reasonable. They landed like an insult. The tall thug's smile vanished. "You don't tell me what to do." He shoved Daniel lightly in the shoulder, not enough to hurt, just enough to assert control. A ripple of gasps moved through the bus. Daniel didn't stumble, he barely moved, but something shifted behind his eyes, something cold, precise. The German shepherd's ears snapped fully forward. His body leaned an inch ahead of his center of gravity. His tail went still. The cap-wearing thug noticed. "Yo, your dog." "Sit," Daniel said softly. The dog sat back instantly, gaze never leaving the men. That was when the laughter died. The tall thug frowned. "You see that? He listens real good." "So," the third thug said, though his voice lacked confidence now. "So maybe he's one of those cop dogs," the cap-wearing one said with a half-laugh. "Like on TV." The tall thug barked out a laugh. "Yeah, right, this guy, a cop." He looked Daniel up and down. "You don't look like no cop." Daniel didn't correct him. The bus light turned green. The vehicle lurched forward again, throwing the standing thug slightly off balance. The tall one reached out, grabbing the seat back, and then, deliberately, he kicked the German shepherd's paw. Hard. The sound was sharp, a dull thud against bone. Time slowed. The German shepherd let out a deep, unmistakable growl that vibrated through the floor. Several passengers cried out. Someone screamed. The dog surged forward half a step before stopping himself, muscles quivering with restraint. Daniel stood up. The movement was smooth, controlled, and immediate. He placed himself squarely between the men and his dog, shoulders squared, stance solid. "That's enough," he said. His voice had changed. It wasn't louder, but it carried weight now. Authority, finality. The tall thug stood too, puffing out his chest. Or what? Daniel reached into his jacket. A collective gasp sucked the air from the bus. A woman covered her mouth. The driver slammed his foot onto the brake slightly, the bus jerking. The thugs tensed, eyes wide, expecting a weapon. Instead, Daniel pulled out a worn leather badge holder and flipped it open just long enough for the gold to catch the light. "Police. K9 unit." The tall thug slapped it out of his hand before anyone else could fully register it. The badge hit the floor and slid under a seat. "Nice prop," he said, laughing too loudly. "You think we stupid." Daniel exhaled slowly, not in anger, in disappointment. Behind him, the German shepherd rose to his feet without command, body aligned, eyes locked, teeth just barely visible now. The bus driver shouted, "Hey, that's enough, everyone sit down." No one listened. The cap-wearing thug took a step back. "Man, I don't know." The third thug shoved him aside. "He bluffin', look at him." Daniel's gaze flicked briefly to the bus doors, then back to the men. "Last warning," he said. The bus rocked as it hit another bump. The lights flickered again. And in that unstable, electric moment, the smallest thug made the worst mistake of his life. He swung first, fist cutting through the air toward Daniel's face. Everything that followed happened too fast for the passengers to fully process. And far too late for the men to stop it. The punch never connected. Daniel sidestepped with fluid precision, catching the man's wrist midair. The movement was so smooth it looked like a trained dance rather than a defense. The German shepherd stiffened, tail bristling slightly, muscles coiled beneath fur like springs ready to release. The bus seemed to pause, rattling slightly over a pothole, lights flickering above, as if the city itself had held its breath. "Enough," Daniel said, his voice calm but sharp, cutting through the tense air like a knife. His hand on the thug's wrist wasn't violent, it was controlled, commanding. "Sit, now." The man froze, shock breaking through his bravado. The tall thug took a hesitant step back, eyes darting between Daniel and the dog. What are you?" he stammered. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at his dog. A subtle nod, invisible to most of the passengers, sent the German shepherd into motion. The dog moved closer, not lunging, not barking, just positioning himself strategically, a silent shadow over the standing men. Each step was deliberate, controlled, and filled with an unspoken warning. "You guys think this is a joke," Daniel said, finally lifting his badge to chest level again. "This isn't a costume and that isn't a pet." The tallest thug's face drained of color. "See, come on, man, you bluffin', ain't no cop would." The German shepherd growled low in his throat, vibration rolling through the bus floor. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a warning for humans. It was a sound meant for predators, instinctively understood by the men standing before him. One of the thugs, younger and smaller, stepped back, realizing his initial aggression had consequences he hadn't anticipated. But the tallest one, fueled by adrenaline and humiliation, moved forward instead. "You can't scare me with some dog," he spat. Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "You're testing the wrong people." Suddenly, the smallest thug lunged toward the dog, trying to shove him away. The German shepherd reacted instinctively, teeth snapping inches from the man's hand, stopping only at Daniel's sharp command. "Enough." The man froze, hands trembling. Sweat beaded on his forehead. A woman sitting near the front grabbed her child, pressing herself against the window. The bus driver slammed his palm on the wheel, heart pounding, but dared not intervene further. Daniel reached into his jacket once more. This time it wasn't the badge he pulled out. It was a small, worn notebook with scribbled notes, a field log he carried on every shift. The movement, subtle as it was, signaled preparedness. The German shepherd settled, sitting directly between Daniel and the remaining men, ears forward, chest heaving. "You need to step back," Daniel said, "and stay there until this bus reaches the next stop." The tallest thug laughed nervously. "Or what? Your little mutt gonna?" The German shepherd lunged forward on a silent command, teeth snapping so close to the man's jacket that his eyes went wide in genuine fear. He stumbled backward, nearly colliding with the pole. Passengers gasped, some recoiling, others frozen in awe. The bus swayed slightly with the sudden movement and the lights flickered again, casting half the scene in shadow. Daniel took a single step forward, placing himself squarely in the aisle, blocking any potential escape route for the thugs. "Hands where I can see them. Now." The remaining two men exchanged terrified glances. The one in the hoodie reached instinctively into his pocket. Daniel's eyes followed the movement instantly. The German shepherd growled sharply, low and menacing, making the man freeze mid-motion. "Do not move," Daniel commanded. The bus seemed impossibly still now. Only the sound of rain striking the windows, the faint hiss of the brakes, and the rapid breathing of the young thugs filled the space. Every passenger was watching, caught between fear and fascination. The tall thug swallowed hard, trying to regain control of his voice. "Yo, man, it's just a bus fight. Chill." Daniel's gaze didn't waver. The German shepherd's growl intensified, a controlled, dangerous vibration that made every hair on the standing men's arms stand on end. A single bead of sweat slid down the tallest thug's temple. He realized too late that the quiet man he had mocked, the man who looked like an easy target, wasn't just prepared. He was trained, deadly, precise, and entirely capable. The bus jolted again over another pothole, tossing the standing thugs forward slightly. The German shepherd leaned into the move, perfectly balanced, eyes never leaving their targets. "You've crossed the line," Daniel said, his voice steady, almost serene. "Last chance." A pause, silence except for the dog's low, resonant growl. The thug's bravado evaporated, replaced by something far more primal, fear. The smallest thug's eyes darted to the exit, calculating. The tall one clenched his fists, as if hoping to bluff his way out. And in that pregnant pause, the air on the bus crackled like live electricity. Then Daniel moved. And everything changed in an instant. The bus tilted slightly around a corner, lights flickered, and the remaining thugs realized, too late, that this quiet man with the watchful dog had no intention of letting them leave the aisle alive. Something in the air shifted, everyone felt it. The German shepherd stepped forward, ready. Daniel's hand reached under his jacket. The thugs didn't know which threat would strike first, man or dog, but both were deadly. And the first mistake had already been made. If you want, I can continue part 4 next, where the police reveal fully begins and tension escalates to a near-explosive confrontation inside the bus. Do you want me to continue immediately? The bus lurched around a corner, the passengers' bodies pressed uncomfortably against the seats. Daniel's gray eyes never wavered from the 3 men who had mistaken his silence for weakness. Every breath he took was measured, every movement calculated. The German shepherd shifted slightly, muscles taut beneath its glossy coat, ears forward, tail stiff but controlled. He was ready, but restrained, waiting for the precise moment his handler gave the signal. The smallest thug, still trembling from the earlier shove, lunged toward the dog again, this time aiming to kick it. Instinctively, the German shepherd stepped sideways, baring his teeth just enough to intimidate without striking. Daniel's voice cut through the rising chaos, calm but sharp. "Stop!" The word echoed in the bus like a gunshot. The growl faded. The thug froze, hands midair, realizing his error too late. The other 2 men took a step back, suddenly aware that this quiet, unassuming man and his dog were not to be trifled with. Daniel's hand went under his jacket, smooth and deliberate. He pulled out a leather badge holder, flipping it open just long enough for the gold letters to flash in the dim bus light. Police K9 Unit. The tallest thug laughed nervously, slapping the badge away as if he could dismiss its authority. "Yeah, right," he said, trying to recover his bravado. "Nice costume." Daniel sighed, a sound more like disappointment than frustration. "You don't understand. This isn't a costume. That dog isn't a pet. He's trained, highly trained, and you are very close to discovering why that matters." Passengers craned their necks to see, whispers spreading like wildfire. Some stared in awe, others in fear. The bus driver slammed his hand on the steering wheel, wishing he could stop time and undo the last 10 minutes. The cap-wearing thug glanced at his friends, panic beginning to replace arrogance. "Man, this ain't right," he muttered, taking a hesitant step back. The German shepherd shifted again, body coiled, eyes locked on the men, tail no longer wagging but poised, controlled, ready. A low, resonant growl rumbled from his chest, deep enough that it vibrated through the bus floor. "You have one last chance," Daniel said. His tone was even, almost gentle, but every passenger could feel the weight of authority behind it. "Hands where I can see them. Do not move, or this ends very badly for you." The tallest thug's bravado faltered. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight, realizing the fight he thought he had already won was slipping through his fingers. Sweat beaded on his temple. He glanced at the exit, weighing escape, but the bus was moving, the doors locked. There was no simple exit. The smallest thug tried again, impulsively, to reach for the dog's leash. In a heartbeat, the German shepherd lunged, not to bite, but to intercept. Teeth snapped within inches of the man's hand. The air on the bus seemed to crackle with tension. "Enough," Daniel barked, and the dog halted immediately, sitting perfectly, eyes still locked on the threat. The precision, the obedience, stunned everyone. Passengers gasped. Some whispered prayers. A few children clutched their mothers' hands, eyes wide. The bus itself seemed suspended, every moment stretched taut with anticipation. Daniel reached once more into his jacket. This time, his hand emerged holding a small, tactical flashlight and a handheld radio clipped to his belt. Tools, yes, but symbols of authority and preparation. The combination told a story. This man was no ordinary civilian. Every movement, every item he carried was deliberate, professional. "Do not move," he repeated. I am a K-9 officer. That dog is trained to protect me and to protect innocent people. You will comply or you will regret it." The tall thug swallowed hard, trying to force his voice to steady. We didn't know." Daniel's gray eyes narrowed slightly. "You should have known." The bus jolted over another pothole. The movement sent a flash of panic through the men, adrenaline spiking as they realized the reality of their situation. Daniel's hand moved subtly, a signal the German shepherd understood instantly. The dog rose to his feet, teeth barely visible, posture coiled, ready. The remaining thug, desperate to save face, reached into his hoodie pocket. Daniel's eyes locked on the movement instantly. The bus fell silent. Passengers froze. Every heart in the bus seemed to stop simultaneously. The tension was a living thing, crawling along the aisles, wrapping around every passenger, threatening to explode. Daniel's voice was calm but lethal. "Hands out of your pockets, slowly, now." The man hesitated. One wrong move and the precision-trained dog would act. Daniel's eyes flicked to the bus doors, then back to the threat. The minutes stretched impossibly long. Then a shout from the back of the bus pierced the tension. A passenger's phone camera light flashed briefly, illuminating the scene. In that second, everything, the growl, the flashing badge, the poised dog, Daniel's unwavering stare, coalesced into a single, undeniable fact. This quiet man was not to be underestimated. The smallest thug dropped to his knees, trembling. The other two raised their hands slowly, every eye in the bus locked on them. Daniel's lips parted, not in anger but in control. "Do not test me again." The German shepherd sat down beside him again, calm but alert, tail still, muscles ready. And for a moment, the bus held its collective breath. But outside, the rain fell harder. The streets reflected neon lights in puddles that shimmered like liquid mirrors. The city was unaware of how close violence had come to erupting inside this moving metal tube. And inside, Daniel and his dog waited. For the next mistake. The bus shuddered slightly as it hit a worn patch of asphalt, lights flickering in rhythm with the rain that pounded against the windows. The remaining thugs stood frozen, hands slowly rising, faces pale, and eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. The air had transformed into something sharp, electric, a tangible line of tension stretching between the quiet man, his dog, and the men who had thought they could intimidate them. Daniel kept his hand close to his jacket, eyes never leaving the tallest thug. The German shepherd sat beside him, chest rising and falling with controlled breathing, muscles tensed, tail stiff but poised. The dog wasn't just a companion. He was a weapon, trained for split-second decisions, ready to act on instinct, but always guided by Daniel's commands. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," Daniel said, his voice low but carrying authority that rippled through the bus. "I'm not just some quiet guy. This dog isn't just a pet. We're K-9 officers." The tallest thug snorted, shaking his head in disbelief. "Yeah, right, a K-9 officer. Look at you, man, you don't even look like." Daniel's eyes narrowed. In a single fluid movement, he stepped forward, placing himself directly in front of the tall thug, blocking any thought of retreat. The German shepherd mirrored his motion, stepping to the side with perfect precision, standing as a silent wall between Daniel and the others. "Last warning," Daniel said. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried weight. "Move wrong, and you'll find out exactly what that means." The smallest thug, already shaking from fear, attempted to back away, his foot slipping slightly on the wet bus floor. Daniel's gaze flicked to him, not in anger but in calculated evaluation. One twitch, one reckless move, and the dog would act. The tall thug's bravado cracked. "You're bluffing, right? There's no way a dog." Before he could finish, Daniel gave a subtle hand signal, almost imperceptible to anyone but the German shepherd. In an instant, the dog's muscles coiled, his body low and tense. The growl that emerged from his chest was quiet, controlled, and deadly. It resonated through the bus, vibrating along the floor and walls, making every passenger flinch. The man froze mid-step, eyes locked on the dog, realizing for the first time that the threat was real. Panic replaced arrogance. Daniel reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a fully functional police radio. He clicked the mic, voice calm and professional. "Dispatch, this is Unit 44K. We have suspects detained on a bus. K9 on site. No shots fired. Prepare backup." The thugs stared at him, their bravado evaporating completely. The badge on his chest, the controlled presence, the radio, and the coiled dog, all of it screamed authority. And it wasn't an act. It was reality. The cap-wearing thug's hand twitched toward his hoodie pocket, a sudden motion that set the German Shepherd on full alert. Teeth bared, low growl rumbling through the bus floor, the dog advanced a single step, perfectly controlled. "Hands," Daniel barked, "now." The man froze, eyes wide, realizing the grave mistake he had almost made. He lifted his hand slowly, palm out, trembling. The tallest thug, desperate to reclaim some shred of dignity, took a step forward. The German Shepherd responded instantly, moving a fraction closer, growl deepening. Daniel didn't move. He didn't have to. The dog's discipline and lethal precision conveyed the warning clearly. One wrong step and it would end badly. Passengers held their breath. Some whispered prayers. A mother clutched her child tightly. Even the bus driver leaned forward, gripping the wheel, eyes wide, heart racing. Daniel's gaze swept over the thugs one final time. "You've made multiple mistakes," he said, his voice cold now, "and each one brought you closer to serious consequences. This stops now." The German Shepherd sank back slightly, still alert but obeying the silent command from Daniel. The tall thug swallowed hard, finally letting the fear fully set in. The smallest thug crouched slightly, knees wobbling, hands still in the air. Then Daniel clicked his radio again, louder this time. "Unit 44K suspects contained, requesting immediate backup." The sound of distant sirens began to pierce the rain outside, growing louder by the second. The thugs' panic reached a peak, their eyes darting toward the doors, searching desperately for an escape that didn't exist. The bus was a cauldron of tension. Every passenger watched, hearts pounding, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. A quiet man who had been underestimated, a dog who was far more than a companion, and a confrontation that could have turned deadly in an instant. Daniel exhaled slowly, muscles relaxing fractionally, eyes still scanning the men. "No one moves until the police arrive," he said. "You've been warned." The German Shepherd sat back down beside him, posture still alert, eyes locked on the men. His growl had faded, but the silent menace remained. Outside, the city rain fell harder, reflecting the flashing neon lights on the wet streets. Inside, the passengers whispered among themselves, unable to break the spell of what they had just witnessed. And somewhere beneath the surface, the thugs realized they had made a catastrophic mistake, one that would be remembered for the rest of their lives. Daniel's gray eyes never left them. His hand brushed the dog's collar once, reassuring him. The bus continued through the dark, slick streets, carrying a storm of tension, fear, and awe, all contained within a metal tube moving steadily toward its next stop. And the next move would determine everything. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, a pounding echo that reverberated through the bus, amplifying the tension already thick in the air. Rain streaked the windows in sheets, turning city lights into fragmented neon streaks that blurred the faces of the terrified passengers. The three thugs, now fully aware of the situation, pressed themselves against each other, eyes wide, sweat and rain dripping down their foreheads. Their bravado had completely vanished, replaced by raw, unfiltered fear. The smallest thug's trembling hand inched toward his pocket again, despite Daniel's warning. The German Shepherd's low growl rolled through the bus like distant thunder. Every muscle in his body was taut, coiled and ready, eyes locked on the threat with deadly precision. Daniel's hand flicked a subtle command, imperceptible to anyone but the dog. In one instantaneous motion, the dog lunged, not in anger but with exact, trained force. He knocked the man off balance, sending him sprawling into the seat across the aisle. The impact drew gasps from passengers and a shriek from a child. "Don't move," Daniel barked, stepping forward, body a shield between the dog and the remaining two thugs. His badge glinted under the flickering lights, a symbol of authority that no one dared challenge. The cap-wearing thug froze mid-step, hands raised in surrender, but the tallest thug, desperation clouding his judgment, made the fatal choice to charge Daniel's side. In a heartbeat, the German shepherd intercepted. Teeth snapped dangerously close to the man's jacket, halting him in his tracks. Daniel's hand reached out and guided the dog back, controlling him with the perfect balance of command and restraint. The bus itself seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the moment, passengers gripping seats, hearts pounding as if they too were part of the tactical operation unfolding. The tall thug's eyes widened, terror replacing any semblance of bravado. "Okay, I'm not moving," he stammered, backing toward the rear doors. But the exit was useless. The bus was still moving, the driver unable to safely stop in the rain-soaked streets and the other passengers tightly packed, leaving no room for escape. Daniel didn't flinch. He reached for his radio again, voice calm but firm. "Unit 44K suspects contained, K9 in position, requesting immediate backup." The German shepherd lowered slightly, muscles still coiled like springs, eyes never leaving the men. One wrong move and the dog's training would turn lethal in seconds. The thugs realized that every instinct, every movement, every decision from this point forward could be their last mistake. Suddenly, the smallest thug tried a desperate lunge toward the bus door. The dog reacted instantly, intercepting him with perfect timing, forcing him back into a corner near the emergency exit. The man's eyes were wide with panic, realizing too late that he was completely trapped. A woman screamed from the front of the bus, pressing herself to the window, clutching her child. The bus driver's hands gripped the wheel tightly, knuckles white, as he tried to maintain control while chaos unfolded behind him. Rain splattered the windshield in jagged streaks, turning the streets into a mirror of flashing, distorted light. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone stay calm. Nobody moves until the police arrive." But the remaining tall thug, in an act of sheer desperation, made a split-second decision. He reached under his hoodie as if to grab something. Time slowed for a heartbeat. The German shepherd's growl deepened, vibrating through the bus floor. Daniel's eyes locked on the man, recognizing the motion instantly. "Hands now," Daniel commanded. The man froze mid-motion. The dog's teeth snapped within inches of his hands, a warning impossible to ignore. Panic overtook him completely. He dropped whatever he had been reaching for and raised his hands high, shaking violently. The other thug, realizing the gravity of the situation, collapsed onto the floor, hands in the air, trembling. The bus fell into a tense silence, broken only by the growl of the dog and the rhythm of the rain outside. A flash of blue and red light appeared in the front windows as police cars pulled alongside the bus. Sirens blared, lights reflecting off the wet streets. Backup had arrived. Relief washed through the passengers, but the thugs remained frozen, staring at Daniel and his dog with faces pale and minds reeling. Daniel exhaled slowly, kneeling slightly to stroke the dog's neck. "Good job," he murmured, his voice steady, reassuring. The German shepherd settled back into a calm sitting position, tail low but alert, eyes still scanning for any movement. The officers boarding the bus immediately moved to secure the suspects. Handcuffs clicked, backup radios crackled, and the chaotic energy of the last few minutes began to fade. Passengers whispered to each other, some crying softly, others shaking, unable to fully comprehend the danger they had just survived. The child in the mother's arms buried his face against her shoulder, wide-eyed, clutching his small stuffed toy for comfort. Daniel remained standing, badge visible, hand resting lightly on the leash. The bus was calm now, but the echoes of fear and adrenaline lingered in the tight, damp air. He scanned the passengers once more, making sure everyone was safe, every detail accounted for. The German Shepherd remained poised at his side, a perfect blend of calm and alertness. He wasn't a pet. He wasn't a companion. He was a protector, a trained officer whose skill had prevented disaster. But the night was far from over. The bus doors opened fully now, officers guiding the thugs off the vehicle. The tallest one looked back once, terror etched into his features, realizing fully the enormity of what he had just survived. The smallest thug sobbed quietly, shaking, mumbling apologies he knew couldn't erase the fear he had caused. Daniel clipped the leash back to the dog's collar. "Stay," he commanded. The dog sat immediately, obedience perfect, discipline unmatched. The passengers began to murmur among themselves, some approaching Daniel to thank him, some still too stunned to speak. The rain continued to pour, washing the streets clean, but leaving the memory of the night vivid and raw. Daniel turned to the bus driver, giving a brief nod. "Everyone's safe," he said simply. "That's what matters." But as he and the dog prepared to leave the bus, a sudden, unexpected sound, a faint cough almost imperceptible, caught Daniel's attention from the back. He froze. The German Shepherd's ears twitched, body alert again. The threat might have seemed over. But Daniel knew better. Something wasn't right. And the night wasn't finished. The bus hummed softly now, tires whispering over rain-slicked asphalt, lights flickering from passing street lamps. The immediate danger, the three thugs, had been neutralized. Their shouts had died, replaced by the murmur of relieved passengers. Daniel leaned slightly against the seat, scanning the faces of the weary commuters. His German Shepherd remained alert at his side, ears twitching at every movement, chest rising and falling with controlled precision. He allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but it was short-lived. From the front of the bus came a sudden, choked gasp. Daniel's head snapped toward the sound. A middle-aged woman was slumped in her seat, hands pressed to her chest, eyes wide with terror. Her breathing was erratic, shallow. Her lips trembled, a faint blue tinge creeping across her skin. "Ma'am," Daniel called, voice calm but urgent as he knelt beside her. "Can you hear me?" She wheezed, gasping between words. "I can't breathe," she rasped. Panic flared instantly through the bus, passengers rising and stepping back, unsure of what to do. The air grew thick, heavy with fear again, as adrenaline replaced the fleeting relief. Daniel's hands moved swiftly, checking her pulse, scanning for signs of trauma. Nothing external, this was sudden, medical. His mind raced, recalling every emergency response protocol he had drilled hundreds of times. Every second counted. "Stay with me," he said firmly, voice steady but commanding. "You're going to be okay." The German Shepherd sat beside her, head low, eyes trained on the woman, tail wagging once in a subtle gesture of reassurance. Though the dog was an instrument of protection, he seemed to sense vulnerability now, adjusting instinctively. Passengers whispered, some reaching for phones, calling 911 again, voices shaky. Daniel ignored them, focused entirely on the woman. His hands moved expertly, performing what he hoped would stabilize her until paramedics arrived. He pressed firmly but carefully on her chest, counting out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. The minutes stretched, each beat like an eternity. The bus hummed under the rain, swaying slightly as the driver maintained control, unsure if he should pull over or continue to the next stop. The flashing lights outside painted jagged patterns on the windows, reflecting in the terrified eyes of the passengers. Suddenly her body went slack for a terrifying moment. Her eyes closed, lips parting. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Daniel's heart hammered. He didn't pause. His hands pressed harder, chest compressions timed perfectly. Come on," he muttered under his breath. The woman's eyes fluttered, then snapped open. A gasp of air tore through her throat. Relief flooded the bus in a wave so strong some passengers wept openly. Daniel exhaled, the tension in his shoulders finally easing, but his eyes never left the woman. "Stay still," he said, softer now. "Paramedics are almost here." The German shepherd leaned slightly into her side, a comforting presence, growl gone, demeanor protective but gentle. Passengers murmured in awe and gratitude, witnessing a man who had contained danger with skill and now was saving a life with equal mastery. Sirens grew louder, closer. The bus shuddered slightly as police and EMS arrived at the next stop. Officers moved quickly to secure the thugs outside while paramedics rushed onto the bus, taking over from Daniel seamlessly. He stepped back, letting them work, but stayed close, monitoring every detail. The woman's breathing steadied under their care. Passengers whispered, some thanking him, others too stunned to speak. Daniel finally allowed himself a moment to straighten, glancing at the German shepherd. The dog sat perfectly still, obedient and disciplined, eyes scanning the bus as if to say, "Threats are neutralized, but vigilance remains." For a moment, Daniel's gaze met those of the former thugs. Fear and regret painted their faces, understanding fully now the magnitude of what had nearly happened. The tallest thug avoided eye contact entirely, knowing any glance could invite consequences. Daniel's voice cut through the quiet murmurs of the bus. "This bus is safe. Everyone else, remain seated until authorities finish processing." But just as the tension seemed to ebb, a sudden metallic clatter echoed from the rear of the bus. Something fell, small but deliberate. Daniel's instincts snapped immediately. His eyes darted to the sound. The German shepherd's ears twitched, body coiling with instant readiness. The sound came again, closer this time, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement in the shadows of the last row. Daniel's jaw tightened. His hand moved slightly toward the dog, a silent command. Every passenger stiffened, sensing the shift in energy. The bus was quiet now, almost eerily so. The rain continued to hammer the windows, masking subtle noises. Daniel's eyes scanned the dim corners, adrenaline spiking again. Something was wrong. Someone or something was still on this bus, unnoticed. And Daniel knew instinctively that it had the potential to undo every second of control he had painstakingly maintained. The German shepherd growled low in response, a deep, resonant warning that drew the attention of the passengers. Fear returned, sharper this time because this threat was unknown. Daniel's voice, calm yet deadly, cut through the tension. "No one moves. Stay exactly where you are." The bus felt smaller now, every shadow a potential danger. Every passenger held their breath, eyes wide, hearts hammering. And outside, the rain continued to pour, relentless, indifferent. Inside, the quiet man and his disciplined dog faced a new, invisible threat. One wrong move, and the bus could erupt into chaos again. The question hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Who or what was still aboard? The metallic clatter repeated, this time unmistakable, coming from the back of the bus. Daniel's gray eyes narrowed, scanning every shadow, every passenger, every crevice. His body was tense, coiled with readiness, his hand brushing lightly against the German shepherd's thick neck. The dog's muscles twitched beneath his fur, tail stiff, ears pricked forward. The growl that rose from deep in his chest was low, vibrating through the bus floor, warning everyone. Something dangerous lingered. Daniel stepped forward, silent, deliberate. He didn't panic. He never panicked. Every passenger's eyes followed him, breaths held, hearts hammering in unison. The faintest shift in a coat pocket, a shuffle of feet, drew his attention instantly. "There's someone back here," he said, voice calm but commanding, slicing through the tension like a blade. "Show yourself." The back corner remained dark, a shadowed gap between two seats. Movement flickered, small, hesitant. A young man, barely 17, had hidden himself during the chaos with the thugs, trembling, wide-eyed hand gripping a small metal pipe. He had intended only to scare, maybe snatch a phone, maybe assert bravado, but he hadn't counted on Daniel or his dog or the presence of authority. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Instead, he took one slow step forward. The German shepherd mirrored him, every muscle coiled, eyes locked on the boy. "It's over," Daniel said, calm, almost gentle. "Put the pipe down. Step away from it slowly. Nobody will hurt you if you obey." The boy froze, sweat and fear glistening on his face. Every instinct screamed flight, but he couldn't move fast enough, not against the coiled force before him. The German shepherd growled, low, a sound that reverberated in the boy's chest like a warning he could not ignore. He dropped the pipe, slowly, trembling. Daniel's hand guided the dog to sit beside him, muscles relaxing slightly, but alertness never leaving the dog's posture. The bus exhaled as one passenger's releasing held breath, murmuring, some crying softly. Relief was tangible. Daniel approached the boy carefully, crouching slightly to meet his eyes. "You're lucky," he said quietly. "This could have gone very badly. Now stay put until the officers handle the rest." Officers boarded the bus fully, moving with practiced precision. The three original thugs were already cuffed outside, shivering in the rain, faces pale and drained of pride. The boy, now unarmed and compliant, was guided to a seat. The German shepherd remained beside Daniel, posture perfect, alert but calm. Passengers whispered, some approaching Daniel to thank him, others staring in awe, unable to comprehend fully what they had witnessed. Mothers clutched children tighter. Elderly men shook their heads in disbelief. The bus driver exhaled, gripping the wheel, hands still trembling. He had witnessed bravery and chaos in equal measure. Daniel straightened, brushing raindrops off his jacket, eyes scanning the bus one last time. Every passenger safe, every threat neutralized, every movement calculated. The quiet man, the unassuming commuter, had revealed himself in the most dramatic way possible, competent, calm, deadly precise, and in full control. A young boy near the front whispered to his mother, wide-eyed, "That dog, he's a hero." The German shepherd's ears flicked toward the voice, tail wagging once subtle, disciplined. Daniel smiled faintly, brushing a hand along the dog's neck. "Good boy," he murmured. Officers nodded in acknowledgement, clapping Daniel lightly on the shoulder, clearly impressed by the seamless handling of the situation. The passengers offered quiet thanks, some stepping forward hesitant to shake his hand. But Daniel waved them off. His job, as always, wasn't about recognition. It was about control, discipline, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. As the bus doors closed behind the last police officer, rain washing the streets into gleaming mirrors, Daniel and his dog prepared to step off. The city, oblivious to the storm that had unfolded within a simple bus ride, stretched before them. Neon lights, puddle reflections, traffic flowing like liquid silver. The passengers would remember this night forever. How a quiet man and his German shepherd had faced chaos, threat, and panic, and emerged unshaken. They had witnessed courage in its purest, most disciplined form, and the reality that some people, and some dogs, were far more capable than appearances suggested. Daniel clipped the leash, giving the German shepherd a subtle command. The dog sat, tail low but alert, eyes scanning. Daniel straightened, shoulders square, gaze forward. Together they walked off the bus, blending back into the city's night, calm and unassuming once more. The rain began to ease, the neon lights reflecting in the puddles like shattered pieces of a storm past. But the story of the quiet man, the K-9 officer, and his hero dog would ripple through the city for years to come, whispered in awe by the passengers who had lived through it. And somewhere in the shadows of the wet streets, Daniel and his German shepherd remained ready, calm, patient, dangerous if crossed. Because true strength doesn't announce itself, it simply acts when the moment demands it. The city rolled on, unaware of how close it had come to disaster, and unaware that a quiet man and his faithful dog had held it back with nothing but discipline, courage, and precision. The night had ended, but their legend had only just begun.